Well, I'll be on Hannity tonight around 9:30 p.m. Eastern to discuss Robert Costello, the case involving really Michael Cohen. Because at this point, and I'll elaborate more on this later in the program, as far as I'm concerned, Alvin Bragg's on trial. I'll explain what I mean by that later. But in the meantime, Joe Biden has asserted executive privilege over his own tape recordings, that is, video recordings. He's asserted executive privilege that the House of Representatives does not have any right to those recordings. As Katie Pavlich writes at Town Hall, Biden has asserted executive privilege over his audio, with former Special Counsel Robert Hur, publicly released transcript in addition to Hur's investigation into Biden's mishandling of classified information, revealed serious memory loss and confusion for the president. But Biden's executive privilege claim is being blasted as a cover-up and abuse of power. Here's Elise Stefanik. Joe Biden disregarded over 250 years of constitutional executive privilege when he orchestrated an unprecedented raid on President Trump's home to obtain presidential records that President Trump was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. Now Joe Biden's hiding. Just to get this straight, writes our buddy Ben Shapiro, Joe Biden is asserting executive privilege in order to safeguard tape of a law enforcement interview with him about his criminal mishandling of classified information that showed he was senile? Sean Davis, the Federalist. Biden put Trump aides in prison for asserting executive privilege. Meanwhile, he's hiding audio of his deposition. With the Department of Justice prosecutor trying to determine if he broke the same law he's charging Trump with breaking? Given the White House counsel's reasoning, which was reiterated by Attorney General Merrick Garland, the claims of abuse are right on target, especially for political purposes in an election year. White House counsel Edward Siskel said, the absence of a legitimate need for the audio recordings lays bare your likely goal to chop them up, distort them, and use them for partisan political purposes. Meanwhile, Republicans plan to move forward with contempt, and they just voted on it, against Garland for withholding the audio interviews. Now, let's slow down. Executive privilege is not used because it might embarrass the President of the United States if certain information gets out. That's not what executive privilege is for. Executive privilege is to protect, under separation of powers, vital tools that the executive branch has. This has nothing to do with that. They're asserting executive privilege as a cover-up because this man is such a mess, said such outrageous things, that they are afraid if you actually get to see them, the American people, if you actually get to see them, that he'll lose by a landslide. Well, we have every right to see them. We paid for them in the first place. There is no privilege of any kind, presidential privilege, other privileges that Bill Clinton invented to cover his sorry ass. You understand? This is not legitimate use of a constitutional power to protect separation of powers. In fact, it's the opposite. Congress has no need for this, asserts the president's lawyers. They don't get to decide. What exactly is the constitutional protection for asserting executive privilege in this instance? There's not one. There's none. There is no legitimate executive privilege, and he asserts it to cover his sorry ass because he doesn't want you to hear and or see, depending on what they're hiding, Joe Biden in action. Conversely, on at least 8 occasions, Joe Biden waived executive privilege when boxes and boxes of information during the time when Donald Trump was president were delivered to the Soviet-style Nancy Pelosi, Dizzy Lizzie Cheney January 6th committee. He couldn't waive executive privilege fast enough. He didn't care about separation of powers. He didn't care about the politicization of what was taking place. He didn't give a damn. Now, the Democrats like to say these trials are very important, that we get them out. Hillary Clinton among them. Get them out. Get the determinations. Get the sentences before the election so we know who exactly we're voting for. Now, that's not how justice is supposed to work. Phony cases with phony charges, with hyper-speed cases being heard in order to convict somebody, if you can, before the election. Here, this has nothing to do with that. The House committee involved, the Judiciary Committee and others, have been attempting to get these tapes for months. And for the Department of Justice to say, well, they don't have any legitimate purpose for them. That's not the issue. The issue is this. The president and the members of his regime have no legitimate constitutional standing to prevent their release. None. It's a massive cover-up. Here's Merrick Garland, who we never hear from today, out there as a special mob lawyer for the mob boss, Joe Biden, as his inner circle and the Department of Justice keep tightening and tightening and tightening the protection around this guy in the lead up to the election. Cut one, go.
Mr. Attorney General, in your professional capacity, you suggested to the president to invoke executive privilege. He invoked executive privilege. It protects you both personally. Is that a conflict of interest?
Now, let me explain what that excellent question is about. They pulled this stunt on executive privilege last evening, maybe early this morning, because the House was set to hold Garland in contempt for defying their subpoena for these tapes. If he's advising Biden to assert executive privilege, he's protecting his own ass because he doesn't want to be held in contempt. And remember, there have been people who've been held in contempt. You might know Peter Navarro serving a prison sentence. And Steve Bannon just lost his appeal. And those were issues related to executive privilege. Executive privilege is not just for Joe Biden. And so the court struck it down on Navarro's case. They struck it down in Bannon's case. They struck it down in Trump's case. And Biden was shipping boxes by the truckload to this January 6th committee and directing the National Archives to do it, with subpoenas being issued by this committee as they were playing inside baseball. Look, Joe, we're going to issue these subpoenas. We need the boxes. Don't worry, I'll give executive privilege, and that way you'll get them. Executive privilege waivers. But now when it comes not to presidential records, not to separation of powers, when it comes to the House of Representatives wanting full transparency in a criminal investigation that has been concluded, so cannot influence that process. But they want to know what the President of the United States said, and they want to hear it and see it if the video is available. And I would tell Mr. Garland and the others, they do have a constitutional right to see it. They may want to impeach him. He asserts executive privilege to protect himself, and he hoped to prevent Garland from being held in contempt. This is a complete abuse of power. Just like the abuses of power when they were shipping the boxes off to the January 6th committee, the abuses of power in the appointment of Jack Smith unconstitutionally, the abuses of power when they're going behind the scenes with his own operatives and so forth, bringing these cases against Donald Trump, keeping him in this ridiculous Manhattan courthouse for weeks and weeks and weeks. And now this. And now this. So how does Garland respond? Go.
Mr.
The Justice Department is a fundamental institution of our democracy.
Okay, stop. We don't need lectures from you, a-hole. The Department of Justice is a fundamental institution of our democracy. I would remind him that the Department of Justice didn't even exist when the nation was founded. But if it is a fundamental institution of our democracy, it's now a fundamental institution of their tyranny, because that's what they've turned it into. Go ahead.
Depend on us to ensure that our investigations and our prosecutions are conducted according to the facts and the law and without political influence. We have gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that the committees get responses to their legitimate...
They don't want all your extraordinary BS. They want the tapes. You've given them everything but the tapes. So you could stand in front of that microphone and talk about how you've bent over backwards to accommodate them. But you will not give them the tapes. Go ahead.
But this is not one. To the contrary, this is one that would harm our ability in the future to successfully pursue sensitive investigations.
Why? Why? Are you telling me Joe Biden wouldn't have submitted to an interview? Wouldn't have submitted to a subpoena? He would have been forced to respond in one fashion or another. Are you telling me that if Joe Biden knew that the potential existed, that his testimony, audio and or video, would be made available to Congress, that he would obstruct justice, that he would deny a subpoena, that he would lie under oath during the course of the investigation? What exactly are you telling us? What exactly? He wouldn't be cooperating? You talk about political. This privilege claim is political. Go ahead.
Now, there have been a series of unprecedented and, frankly, unfounded attacks on the Justice Department.
Yeah, right.
This request, this effort to use contempt as a method of obtaining our sensitive law enforcement files.
What is so sensitive about these tapes, ladies and gentlemen? Is there classified information on them? No, but if there was, they could redact that. What is so sensitive? I'll tell you what's sensitive. We have a blithering idiot as President of the United States, and Robert Hur said in his report he's a blithering idiot in so many words. He's imbecilic. His responses were so cringeworthy that there's no way he could get a conviction. The jury would be so sympathetic to a doddering, old, dementia-ridden man. That's what he basically wrote. Beside the fact that he said, it's been our position we can't indict a sitting president. But that aside for the moment, that's what they're worried about. And so there is the Attorney General of the United States, who was silent all through the Hitler Youth, roaming through our colleges and universities, still roaming through our colleges and universities, doesn't make a strong speech, doesn't say we're in charge, we're going to take care of this, doesn't say a damn thing, and does even less. Here he is. This could harm their investigative techniques. What investigative techniques? You did an audio. The reason you don't want to release them is you know it would sink any chance you have for re-election, because the special counsel, Robert Hur, who was supposed to be sort of a rhino figure, was appalled and said so in the report, that when they interviewed you, they were appalled. My word, but I'm defining what he said. And they do not want the American people to see it. This is a cover-up extraordinaire, especially when you consider what they're doing to Donald Trump and the waiver of executive privilege, left and right, left and right, like he was waving a fan in front of his face on a hot day.